The night was bitterly cold, the kind that made even the toughest people wrap their coats tighter and hurry home. But Danny, a tiny, frail boy no older than 10, had no home to go to. He sat curled up near a closed bakery, his thin hoodie doing nothing against the icy wind. His stomach growled, but hunger was nothing new. Then, a sound, a faint whimper. Danny's head snapped up. Someone was crying. He squinted through the darkness and saw a small figure, even younger than him, sitting alone near a lamppost. A little boy, no more than 5, wearing an expensive coat but shivering and scared. Danny hesitated. He had learned the hard way that getting involved could be dangerous. But something about the kid, his tear-streaked face, the way he hugged his knees felt wrong. Slowly, Danny stood and walked closer. "Hey," he said cautiously. The little boy flinched, then looked up at him with big, terrified eyes. Danny's stomach twisted. This wasn't just any lost kid. Something was very, very wrong. And tomorrow, the entire city would know his name. Before we continue the story, let us know, where are you watching from? Danny hesitated. His gut told him something was off. This kid didn't belong here. Liam clutched his knees, his tiny fingers gripping his expensive coat like it was a shield. His sneakers were spotless, the kind only rich kids wore. His hair was neatly cut, but his face was tear-streaked, his cheeks flushed from crying. Danny had seen plenty of lost kids before, but they usually had parents frantically searching nearby. Not this time. Something inside Danny stirred. Why was this kid alone? He cleared his throat. You okay?" Liam looked up at him, his big, frightened eyes filled with fresh tears. He shook his head. Danny sighed. He didn't have time for this. He had his own problems. "Where's your parents?" Liam hiccuped. I don't know." Danny frowned. How does a kid like this just not know? "You get lost?" Liam shook his head. "No." He wiped his face with the sleeve of his coat. They went inside a big place, and I was waiting, but I got scared, so I walked, and then—" His voice broke into choked sobs. Danny ran a hand through his messy hair. He shouldn't get involved. What if the kid had rich parents who thought he was trying to kidnap him? What if someone was already looking for him? But then Liam's small body trembled, and something sharp and familiar cut through Danny's heart. That feeling, fear, cold, hopelessness. He had felt it too many times himself. Danny sighed. "Damn it." "Look, kid," he muttered, crouching in front of Liam. "I don't know who you are, and I don't know where your parents are, but sitting out here in the cold ain't safe." Liam sniffled. "I want my daddy." Danny stared at him. Something strange happened in his chest. Not jealousy, not the bitterness he usually felt toward kids with families. This was different. He didn't know what it was, but he knew one thing. He wasn't leaving this kid alone. He held out his hand. "Come on." Liam hesitated. Then, slowly, his small fingers curled around Danny's. Danny sighed, pulling him up. "All right," he muttered. "Guess you're stuck with me for now." He had no idea that this one decision was about to change his entire life. The wind howled through the dark alleyways as Danny led Liam away from the empty street. The little boy clutched Danny's hand tightly, his tiny fingers like ice. "Where are we going?" Liam asked, his voice small. Danny exhaled through his nose. Somewhere safe. Truth was, he had no idea where that was. Danny lived on the streets. There were no safe places for kids like him. He usually crashed in abandoned buildings, tucked into hidden corners where no one would notice him. But with Liam, he had to think differently. The kid couldn't handle the cold. His fancy coat was warm, but his small body wasn't built for sleeping on concrete. Danny's mind raced. He had one option left, a run-down storage facility on the edge of the city. It wasn't much, but it had walls, and walls meant warmth. "Can you walk a little faster?" Danny asked. Liam stumbled, trying to keep up. "I'm tired." Danny stopped and looked at him. His cheeks were red from the wind, his eyes drooping with exhaustion. Danny sighed. "All right, kid. Just a little farther, okay?" Liam nodded weakly. Danny wasn't used to caring about anyone else, but something about Liam, small, scared, and too trusting for his own good, made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: responsibility. By the time they reached the storage facility, it was nearly midnight. Danny picked the lock with a skill he had mastered over the years and led Liam inside. The air was dusty, but it was warmer than outside. Danny pulled out a worn-out blanket he had stashed away weeks ago. "Here," he said, wrapping it around Liam. The little boy curled up, his big eyes staring at Danny in the dim light. "Are you a bad guy?" Danny froze. "What?" Liam swallowed. You pick locks. You don't have a home. The movies say bad guys do that." Danny chuckled dryly. That stung a little. "Yeah, well, maybe the movies are wrong," he muttered, leaning against the cold metal wall. Liam hesitated. "You don't seem bad." Danny sighed, closing his eyes. "Get some sleep, kid." Liam curled deeper into the blanket. Within minutes, he was out. Danny stayed awake, watching the entrance. Because out here, the night was never safe. And he'd be damned if he let anything happen to that kid. Danny barely slept. Every sound outside, footsteps, distant sirens, the rustling wind kept him alert. Out here, you couldn't afford to let your guard down. But Liam... The kid slept peacefully, curled up in the old blanket. Danny shook his head. "This kid really trusts me." The first hint of morning light peeked through a crack in the storage door. Danny stretched, his body stiff from the cold floor. Liam stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Is it morning?" Danny smirked. "Yeah, time to get moving." Liam yawned. "Where are we going?" Danny hesitated. He had no plan, no idea how to find Liam's family. Then he remembered something. Last night, Liam had said his dad went inside a big place. What did the building look like? Danny asked. Liam blinked sleepily. It was big, had shiny glass doors, people in fancy clothes. Danny frowned. That sounded like a hotel. His chest tightened. If Liam's dad was in a hotel, that meant he was rich, which meant there were probably people looking for him right now. Danny's stomach twisted. Rich people didn't care about kids like him. They called the cops, not to help, but to get rid of him. Still, he had to do the right thing. Danny dusted himself off. "All right, kid. We're finding your dad." They walked for nearly an hour. Liam's tiny hand clutched in Danny's. Then suddenly, police sirens. Danny's chest clenched as a black SUV screeched to a stop near the hotel entrance. A man in a suit jumped out, his eyes frantic. He scanned the street, then froze when he saw Liam. "Liam!" Before Danny could react, the little boy ripped his hand free and ran toward the man. "Daddy!" Danny's breath caught as the man dropped to his knees, scooping Liam into his arms, holding him tight. The man's face was pale, eyes wet with tears. Danny took a step back, suddenly feeling out of place. That's when he noticed something. The man wasn't just anyone. Danny had seen his face before, on TV, in magazines, on billboards. This was Nathaniel Carter, one of the richest men in the country, and Danny had just found his missing son. Danny stood frozen as Nathaniel Carter clutched Liam tightly, relief washing over the billionaire's face. People rushed out of the hotel, security, reporters, police officers, all looking for Liam. Danny's first instinct? Run. Rich people didn't like kids like him. If the cops asked too many questions, they'd figure out he had nowhere to go. and then he'd be thrown into foster care or worse, locked up for loitering. He took a slow step backward. Then Liam turned. He pointed at Danny with his tiny hand. "Daddy, he found me. He helped me." Nathaniel's gaze snapped to Danny. For a moment, the billionaire just stared at him, taking in the ragged hoodie, the too-thin frame, the worn-out sneakers barely holding together. Danny braced himself. Here it comes. But then, something unexpected happened. Nathaniel stood up, still holding Liam, and walked straight toward Danny. "You're the one who saved my son." His voice was steady, but there was something unreadable in his eyes. Danny shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, I guess." Nathaniel studied him for a long moment. Then he did something even stranger. He held out his hand. Danny blinked. "What?" "Thank you," Nathaniel said. His voice was genuine, grateful. Danny hesitated before slowly shaking his hand. It felt weird, a billionaire shaking hands with a street kid. Then Nathaniel's expression turned serious. "How long have you been living on the streets?" Danny's stomach twisted. There it was. He forced a smirk. "I get by." Nathaniel didn't look convinced. "Where are your parents?" Danny tensed. He hated that question. Liam suddenly grabbed his father's sleeve. "Daddy, can he come with us?" Nathaniel looked down at his son, startled. "What?" Liam clutched Danny's hand. "He kept me safe. He needs a home, too." Danny's chest tightened. No. Rich people didn't adopt kids like him. They handed out money to make themselves feel better, then forgot all about you. Nathaniel looked at Danny again, as if he was thinking hard about something. Then he made a decision that would shock the entire world. The street was silent, despite the flashing lights of cameras and the murmuring crowd. Nathaniel Carter, one of the richest men in the world, was staring directly at Danny. Danny felt exposed, like an animal under a spotlight. He had survived by being invisible, by staying out of sight. Now, every single eye was on him. "Liam," Nathaniel said carefully, "we can't just—" "Why not?" Liam clutched Danny's sleeve. "He helped me. He doesn't have anywhere to go." Danny tensed. He knew how this worked. Rich people felt guilty for a few minutes, offered money, and then went back to their perfect lives. Nathaniel sighed and turned to Danny. "Do you have any family? Anyone looking for you?" Danny's jaw tightened. "No." The billionaire studied him for a long moment, then nodded to one of his security guards. The man stepped forward, pulling out a thick envelope and handing it to Danny. "Take this," Nathaniel said. "It's enough money to get you off the streets. A fresh start." Danny felt his stomach twist. There it was. He could walk away now, rich enough to never starve again. But something about it felt wrong. He looked at Liam, who still held his sleeve, eyes full of hope. He didn't want money. He wanted what Liam had. A home. A family. Danny stared at the envelope, then slowly shook his head. Nathaniel frowned. "You don't want it?" Danny took a deep breath. His voice was quiet but firm. "I don't want your money. I just want a chance." The entire crowd gasped. Nathaniel's expression shifted from surprise to something deeper. Respect. For the first time in years, Danny saw something in an adult's eyes that wasn't pity. Nathaniel took a slow breath. "All right." He turned to his assistant. "Prepare the legal paperwork." Danny frowned. "For what?" Nathaniel's lips curved into a small smile. "For you to come home with us." Danny's heart stopped. This wasn't just a charity gesture. This was real. And for the first time in his life, Danny realized he wasn't alone anymore. Danny's mind was racing. Nathaniel Carter, one of the richest and most powerful men in the country, was standing right in front of him, offering him a home. Not money, not just a hotel room for a night. A real home. A real family. And Danny didn't know how to accept that. For years he had survived by being invisible. No one noticed him. No one cared. Now, suddenly, this billionaire, this man who had everything, was telling Danny that he mattered, that he deserved a place in his world. It didn't feel real. Liam's tiny fingers tightened around Danny's sleeve, his big eyes looking up at him, full of pure, innocent hope. "You'll stay with us, right?" Liam asked softly. Danny swallowed hard. His instinct was to pull away, to say no. Because good things didn't happen to kids like him. Because people didn't keep promises. Because no one ever stayed. Nathaniel must have seen the hesitation in his eyes because he crouched down, meeting Danny at eye level. "I know this isn't easy," Nathaniel said, his voice calm, steady, patient. Danny stared at him. He was used to people looking down at him. Cops, shopkeepers, pedestrians, who saw him as nothing more than a street rat. But Nathaniel wasn't looking down at him. He was looking at him like an equal. "I'm not offering this because I feel bad for you," Nathaniel continued. "I'm offering this because you saved my son's life, and because I see something in you." Danny scoffed, trying to mask the emotions rising in his chest. "Like what?" Nathaniel's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Strength, honor, loyalty." Danny froze. No one had ever said things like that about him. No one had ever looked at him and seen anything more than a thief, a problem, a mistake. But Nathaniel, he saw something different. Danny glanced at Liam again. The little boy's eyes were shining, like he already knew what Danny's answer was supposed to be. "You're not alone anymore," Liam whispered. Danny's throat tightened. He wanted to believe that. But there was still a voice in his head, the voice that had kept him alive all these years, that whispered, "Don't trust them. They'll just throw you away when they get tired of you." Danny hesitated. He wanted this. God, he wanted this so badly. But he didn't know if he could survive the heartbreak when it was taken away. Nathaniel, still watching him closely, sighed and sat down fully on the pavement. The billionaire, a man who probably had never sat on a dirty sidewalk in his life, made himself comfortable right next to Danny, as if he had all the time in the world. "You don't have to decide right now," Nathaniel said, "but I want you to hear me out." Danny stayed silent, waiting. Nathaniel looked down at Liam, stroking his son's hair gently before looking back at Danny. "I built everything I have from the ground up," Nathaniel said. "I know what it's like to have nothing, to feel like you're not good enough, to fight every single day just to prove that you deserve a place in the world." Danny blinked. "You were homeless," Nathaniel chuckled, shaking his head. "Not homeless, but poor. My father worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. I used to watch my mom cry at night because the bills kept piling up." Danny frowned. He couldn't picture someone like Nathaniel, a billionaire in a tailored suit, struggling like that. Nathaniel sighed. "I told myself that when I made it big, I would never forget what it felt like to have nothing." He turned back to Danny, his gaze serious now. "When Liam disappeared," he said, voice tight with emotion, "I thought I lost everything. I thought—" He stopped, exhaling sharply. "But then I found out that you, someone the world had ignored, stepped in and protected my son." Danny stared at him, unsure what to say. Nathaniel's voice softened. "You didn't have to help him. You could have ignored him, walked away, but you didn't. And that tells me more about your character than anything else ever could." Danny felt his hands shake slightly. He had spent years thinking that his life didn't matter, that if he disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. And now, a billionaire was sitting in the dirt next to him, telling him that he was worth something. Nathaniel leaned forward. "Danny, I don't want to give you money. I don't want to fix you or change you. I just want to give you the same chance that I would give my own son." Danny's heart pounded. "You don't have to trust me yet," Nathaniel said, "but I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that I won't give up on you." Danny had no words. His whole life, he had fought to survive alone. And now, for the first time, he didn't have to. A lump formed in his throat. He wasn't sure if he was going to say yes, or if he was even capable of saying yes. But then, Liam made the decision for him. The little boy suddenly let go of his father's hand and threw his arms around Danny's waist, hugging him as tight as he could. Danny froze. "I want you to be my brother," Liam whispered. And just like that, Danny broke. The walls he had spent years building around himself shattered in an instant. His arms slowly, hesitantly wrapped around Liam, his fingers clutching the back of the little boy's coat like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. Nathaniel watched them quietly, his expression understanding. Danny didn't speak. He didn't need to. His answer was clear. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't alone anymore. Danny didn't know how long he stood there, holding Liam as if the little boy was his lifeline. For the first time in his life, he felt wanted. Nathaniel slowly stood up, brushing the dust off his expensive suit. "Come on," he said, his voice steady. "Let's go home." Danny hesitated. Home. That word felt unfamiliar. Nathaniel must have noticed because he placed a gentle hand on Danny's shoulder. "I know this is a lot," he said. "You don't have to decide everything today. But I want you to know that this isn't just for now. You'll have a real place with us, for as long as you want it." Danny swallowed hard. No one had ever given him a choice before. He nodded, just barely, but it was enough. Nathaniel signaled to his driver, and within minutes, a sleek black limousine pulled up. Danny stared at it. He had never been inside a real car before, let alone something this fancy. Liam grinned and tugged on his sleeve. "Come on, it's super cool inside." Danny chuckled, a real, genuine laugh, and let himself be pulled along. The drive to Nathaniel's estate felt surreal. The city disappeared, replaced by long, winding roads and gated mansions. Then they arrived. Danny's mouth went dry as he stared at the massive estate. Tall iron gates, perfectly manicured gardens, a house so big it looked like a hotel. "Whoa," Danny breathed. Liam laughed. "Come on, I'll show you my room." Nathaniel chuckled. "We'll get you your own room too, Danny." Danny blinked. His own room. That thought alone nearly knocked the breath out of him. For years, he had slept on concrete, in alleyways, under bridges, never knowing where he would wake up the next day. Now he had a room, a place, a home. It didn't feel real. As they stepped inside, a woman, tall, elegant, but kind-looking, rushed toward them. "Nathaniel," she gasped, her eyes filling with relief as she scooped Liam into her arms. Danny froze, suddenly feeling like an outsider. Liam giggled. "Mom, Danny found me." The woman, Liam's mother, looked up at Danny. Her eyes softened. "You must be Danny," she said, stepping closer. She didn't hesitate, didn't judge his dirty clothes or his rough appearance. Instead, she did something no one had ever done before. She pulled him into a hug. Danny's breath caught. "You saved my son's life," she whispered. "Thank you." Danny didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to this. Kindness, warmth, a family. But maybe, just maybe, he could learn. That night, as they sat in the grand dining hall, a table full of food Danny had never even seen before, Nathaniel cleared his throat. "I have an announcement to make," he said. His wife looked at him curiously. Liam just stuffed another forkful of mashed potatoes into his mouth. Nathaniel turned to Danny. "I want to make something clear," he said, his voice steady and full of purpose. This is your home now, as long as you want it to be." Danny nodded, still processing it all. But then, Nathaniel took it a step further. "I've spoken to my lawyers," he continued, "and I've made a decision." He took a deep breath. "Danny, I want to adopt you." The room fell silent. Danny felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. "What?" he whispered. Nathaniel smiled. "I don't just want to give you a place to stay. I want to give you a family. I want you to be my son." Danny's vision blurred. No one had ever wanted him before. No one had ever claimed him as their own. He looked at Liam, whose face lit up with pure joy. "Does that mean he's really going to be my brother?" Liam gasped. Nathaniel smiled. "Yes." Danny felt something break inside him. Years of pain, loneliness, and rejection melted away in an instant. He looked at Nathaniel, really looked at him. And for the first time in his life, Danny allowed himself to believe that he was truly wanted. Tears burned his eyes. "Okay," he whispered. Liam cheered. Nathaniel's wife smiled warmly. "And Nathaniel?" Nathaniel pulled Danny into a hug. And Danny, for the first time ever, hugged him back. Because he wasn't just some street kid anymore. He was Danny Carter, and he finally had a family. Danny's story wasn't just about survival. It was about finding hope when all seemed lost. From a forgotten street kid with no family, no future, and no home, he had become part of something greater. He didn't take the money. He didn't run. He made the choice to believe in something bigger than himself, and that's what truly changed his life. What would you have done in Danny's shoes? Would you have trusted Nathaniel or walked away? Let's talk in the comments. If you love powerful, life-changing stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Because sometimes one small act of kindness can change everything.